My chuck adapter doesn't thread very well onto my spindle. There's a lot of slop in it. So this is just what I have to deal with until I get a direct thread chuck that fits well. Although it does teach quite a bit. Because you have to have nearly perfect cut. Just gonna make a red oak podlet. I don't know if I can clean that up any better. Shear scraping helps just because there's no heel to rub and accentuate that vibration. It's red oak, so even just the pore structure of the wood, without my problem with the chuck, presents its own level of vibration. Come on, hook that edge. Don't know why, but in red oak, that little nubbin is the bane of my existence, I think. Oh well, we didn't need to do that, did we? So let's drill a hole and shear scrape out from. See what we get. Other than the need for a cleanup cut there. Not super noticeable. Maybe if we come in and just slowly drag that out. I'm not gonna mess around with that. Just not gonna. Card scraper is not sharp, so just do that. Not happy about it, but we're gonna leave it. Can do that to seal the face. It changes how it warps. Keeps the face dry, wetter, and the backside dries first and shrinks first, and then pushes the face of it around more. I think you get a little more movement out of that method. So I like to do it. Putting a little oil in because this is a very porous wood. And that'll help just fill some of the gaps that the wax left behind. That's that. Looks like we already had some tannin contamination from that cheap steel carving knife we used. Light. Very handy. I like to stop a lot. These aren't about 1/8 of an inch. They don't move very well. And you kind of got to cut a 1/2 inch at a time. Doing it this way, I think. There's no real good way to hand steady it. You can, I'm sure I will, but get it dirty. That, and there's always metal dust and tannins, which are nearly impossible to get out once they start. I think I've had a little bit of metal dust and tannin contamination seep into the wood almost a 1/8 inch in a matter of minutes. So this is about where I want it on the outside. Obviously I gotta come in into here. Now color-wise, our sapwood is pretty uniform, but I don't know what our more heartwood stuff is yet. So we'll just nibble. Still pretty thick. Yeah, that's all still pretty thick. Could do better. So like that. I don't know what I'm feeling here. Okay, I'm feeling the bark. And we're not quite uniform yet, but we're pretty darn close. Again, because of the poor structure of white oak, it warps almost immediately. I don't know if you could hear or see, but when I was shear scraping, the face was already, I don't know, out of round, no longer planar, whatever. Come down here to check our light. See what's going on. Definitely need to come in. It's been a little while. Amount of practice. Okay. See, there again, we just made a pass in here, and we are already out of round. Consistent up till there. So what's our color? That's our color. Move in. Pretty thick down there. Feels relatively uniform. Isn't quite uniform. Right where our light is, still a little thick. And we do have to watch just past our cut. I wish the handle on this scraper was a bit longer. I suppose I could reprofile a little bit. Pull this out. Not a long enough edge. I generally don't sand these. I'll sand the stems I usually don't sand the tops. They get, it's too wet. I don't want to wet sand it. And they just get so out of true that the amount of time you'd put into it probably isn't worth it. I sand the ones that you can dry sand. But not something like this freshly fallen tree. All right, so we've got this knot here, and there's a pith check right there. I'm gonna let the center of this be a little thicker as a result. And I'm gonna see if I can get a little closer and get started on the stem. The reason why this is still so thick, usually I'd run this taper all the way back to where I plan on the base, but we have this knot, and once we get near this grain, it's gonna warp that whole board, or whole log, I should say. All right, so we've got clearance. Now I want to see where that knot is, if it still exists. Still kind of shadow knot grain. Looks like pith right there. That will most likely bend once we get this about half the diameter that it is now. So now is the time to do any cleanup or anything to the bottom of the podlet. Or I guess the backside of the bowl, for lack of a better term. I really need to regrind this tool. It's got a little tiny nick right where I cut a lot. I think I shoved it into a spur. See, there we go. We started thinning it, and now we're getting a little bit of a wobble. Unsure if I want to get in there and try to clean that up, or if the color of the wood already hides it decently. I'm done with the light bulb. Look at that. It took us 27 minutes to make a 3-inch bowl. Funny. I think I'm going to back you up because I want to be able to lean forward more. The stem is as thick as the thickest part of the bowl. Because of this knot back here, we're gonna just have a thicker stem. And I won't need to put a tailstock in as a result. Now, what, we're just touching, not quite. I'm gonna cut down to about here, so about 2 more passes, and then I'm just gonna leave this chunk and I'm gonna work that section. Done a lot of these with knots right in the stem. Usually I end up needing to taper the stem a lot as a result. So if I start thicker, I can get by with less taper. Because the taper, I don't know, it looks funny on this project. It's not, I don't know. You'd be better off to double the width of your stem than you would be to taper the whole thing more. As far as the look. The rest is just a hair high for this part. I want to be like right on center so we can put the wing of the gouge right over top. And this is actually why, if you look real close, this is why this bowl gouge is profiled the way that it is so that I can cut right about here where it's round and it stages the cut. But it also offers me a long section, a long straight-ish section to treat as a skew. So we got an inch in, and now we're getting close to our rest. So we're gonna do that. And because of how much this warped, I don't really want to go back and risk this. I will just hand sand that out later. I don't know. This is my first time cutting green. Well, I guess second time cutting green red oak. And boy, does it dry out and warp fast. So I'm gonna make some concessions. On a bowl, it'd be different. So as we near that knot, we just work shorter chunks. Normally I'd grind out like an inch or two like that, or rough out an inch or two. then come back for cleanup. Again, fancy grain. Plus, it's a tree branch, so it's reactionary wood. It already has stress built into it. And then when you add a knot out of the tree branch, adds extra stress just within the wood. Getting a little thick. I don't like this taper. It's close enough. I also like to leave this section a little thicker so that when I transition I can clean up, or if it moves a lot. However, that habit has led to a lot more tapered podlet stems than I wish to admit. Okay, we're getting too far off the rest. And I want to push the tool further over the top. Teeny tiny pinch. See, we're starting to bend. Where are we on our knot? There's a bark pocket, and then here's our knot. So bark pocket is probably affecting things more than anything else right now. So that looks like a little chunk of burr out. Normally I would have turned my speed down sooner. We've been around 400 RPM. Usually I dip down to about 3 to 250 once I get to here. Looks like that's our pith check. Nope, just some red oak. Now here's where I like to decide what I'm going to do with the bottom. Come up with a detent up into here for more volatile woods. Apple taught me that that's probably a good idea, just so that it can dry more uniformly. So that means I need to create space in between the chuck, but I still like to leave the bark. Oops. Oh, that was bad. Yeah, that was really bad. Oh, there's the line. Maybe we won't have bark on this one. How deep did we bite? Right up in there. That's not great. Okay. Pointy profile spindle gouge. It'll still do everything I want to do with it. Go a little faster, I think. And come around. We need to come in. For now, that ought to work. We have a big chunk right here. Yeah, I'll have to take that out. With what right now, I am unsure. So I'm not going to sharpen that. A bowl gouge. Skewy gouge. Huh. Curiosity. How about a ring cutter? No more bark. If there is, there's going to be very little. Ooh, a chunk came off that. I don't like. Tiny piece of bark. Not a good tool finish. That's where our chunk came from. Oh, if it's gonna be like that, then we'll scrape. Clean that up well. for how bad it was. Now we can clean up the other side. Little fuzz right on our sapwood. Not happy about that tool mark. There's still usable gouge for a cut here. Now I know that taper is pretty drastic, but we don't know where the bark pocket goes. Not terrible. Do we want to bother with this little line? That one's gone. We made ourselves a different one a long time ago, however. Still a tiny, tiny chip. Then we'll sand the bottom at some point to make it sit flat. I'm okay with what's going on. Not the happiest camper, but I'm okay with it. It's gonna want to cut this way, doesn't it? Okay with that. I am okay with that. And we'll figure out what we want to do down in here. So I have a couple of cheap and easy ways to do this one. But I found yesterday I particularly liked this. I have a pretty aggressive burr on here. And try the gouge one more time. I think we've got the room. And this guy. A parting tool can, but you need to make a pretty decent opening. It's just not the favorite. That thing needs a new burr. And we're way off the rest for that cut. And we're operating in such a tiny space. I need to make an Allen wrench cutter for this. And again, your camera is always right where I want to be. Oof, I can't get over my tool handle here. There we are. And that's what I have left. In 51 minutes. All right, now we're back to Stanley Steamer with our improvements. Instead of inner tube, copper insulated wire, steam barrier, right? Set this bad boy up, keeps everything off the table. The towel's gonna do what it needs to do. Let's get to it. Ha, well, valiant effort. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna widen these slots a lot. Obviously, this is only gonna work on one side. I don't want to steam stabilize the top. Bottom I could afford to be steamed. All right, so we're gonna plug this sucker in. Size up a clamp. I think that one will do. In the past, I have sank them in about this much water and boiled them for an hour. And the top warped like crazy. It might actually be a better idea to flip these, but yesterday's recording and today's recording are gonna tell me about that. Tomorrow or later today, we'll probably do this again. Wow. I knew I should have sharpened that gouge, but I didn't know it was that bad. I like to save these things just to see how they crack. All right, we've been in here close enough to 20 minutes. I'm gonna unplug the thing. Oh, and get my gloves. All right, so we had some water come through here. A little bit. There's our back side through the slot, perhaps orienting the slot rather than this way, orienting it this way. All right, here's our clamp. One side's a little thicker than the other, or if it's not, it should be. Oh, wow. Look at that. Steaming oak ignited all the tannins and turned it purple. Just purple. I want to slide this clamp up more. There. Clamped. Very little effort. Oh, more tannin stain. We'll see what happens. This is interesting. These are for fun. And for humidity's sake, that is interesting. So I'd have to wash these in Dawn still before steaming. But we don't have tannin staining on the top. Why on the bottom? Well, there, or is it fuzz? No, that's tannin stain. That's where I used my scraper. However, up here, That's everywhere the towel touched, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's everywhere the towel touched. We get the blue. So that's going to be a thing. But we did get wet down here from some of the steam coming around. We'll see if we get tannin stain where we used our scraper the most. Okay. I'll have to review the video to see which side of the towel I put in, because I did not pay any attention to that. That is interesting. Well, it didn't come from the hinge or the brass. Well, we'll pull it out of the clamp in an hour or so. Well, we're about an hour later. That's what we did last time with a similar diameter stick. Granted, that stick had less cellular moisture, but I don't know. Oh, that's not bad. I like it. Could let it sit longer. It still feels moist. I think I'm just gonna put it in the drying box. And then later I'll figure out something about the tannins. See, all the tannin staining? Not my favorite. Who knows, maybe we'll just dye it. Leave the face. Oh, the puckering from the heat. Whatever. It was an experiment. I enjoyed it.